Andrew is going to be talking to us about mitigating the shiny object syndrome impact on evaluation research of business technology. And as a person that naturally migrates towards shiny objects, this intrigues me highly. So I'm looking forward to it, Andrew. I'll let you take it away.
Great. Let me go ahead and
I will stop sharing, yes, and hand it over to you.
And let me see. Can you see it? Is it the whole screen? Just making sure. Got multiple screens here and technology. I'm a technologist, but to your point, and hopefully you can hear me because I don't control the pipe to my house, so to speak, the internet. So hopefully it goes well. So
yes, we can see
let me
everything.
know if it has a problem because I have a backup.
I
have a backup here. I have my phone right here on as well. So you always think of backup, plan A and plan B, plan C. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Bill, as well, for inviting me to this. And thank you. I've been on the call since this morning. Both awesome presentations. So I look forward to seeing more after mine. So thank you to the other presenters for what they brought to the table for sure. It made me think and rethink some things. I'm Andrew Comerford. I'm the founder and principal of Day 31 Consulting. And what that really means is, I'm not a researcher. However, I have about almost 30 years of business consulting as well as industry experience. And I focus a lot on creating sustainable transformation via optimization of technology. That was interesting about Day 31 is a lot of times I know there's a lot of researchers on this call, but if you put in any type of technology or other things, the technologist will say, okay, the company comes in, you got 30 days of hypercare support or support. What happens on Day 31? Are you ready? Are you going to have their team take on? If you're making those questions at that point, it's too late. You have to think about the well in advance of that. And so that's where I have focused my entire career, literally on technology, and I'll be sharing some of the things over those years, so to speak, related to this. And the idea of the shiny object, before I get into that, is I've always called it the shiny object. To that point, Courtney, like the shiny object that you say, oh, I can, it got your attention, so to speak. And now there's actually things out there called, and I thought about calling the shiny object syndrome, and then I did some more research, and there was things out there calling it that way as well. So I'm not alone, obviously. So, but for those who are on the call, I wanted to make sure I focus this on, I've done a lot of evaluations of technology, very much so, all types of technology, whether enterprise-wide, whether reporting, all types of small, large, etc. Technology as part of many things I've done. And this shiny object can impact that research. It can impact those things. So I'm going to talk about how do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate that, especially if a researcher brought in to help with that process, whether during the evaluation, and evaluations of technology aren't just during the dog and pony, as they talk about, which is bringing multiple vendors in, see about demos, all that, but it's after actually it's been implemented and how you use it as a company or an organization. So, what I'll talk about here is what is the shiny object syndrome, especially related to business technology, and then what are the major business technologies or shiny objects that we've seen over the past 30 years, and the influence that actually get into the influence that shiny object can have on that technology evaluation, and then key ways to mitigate that. How to mitigate that impact. And then any questions, and questions at the end are fine. And after this, I'm always reachable. I'll have my LinkedIn. You can LinkedIn to me and talk further about that. Let's see this. Oops. So what is the shiny object syndrome, right? As Courtney, you talked about, like, it's that constant distraction. And these days it gets more and more with the newest technology. And whatever's trendy must mean it's the best. A lot of times organizations at all levels, people in these organizations, jump to the next innovation without really fully vetting its value. And not just its value on its value's sake, but its value for your organization. Just because so-and-so is using it or another company is using it, and you're seeing now with the plethora of AI going on there, oh my gosh, there's tons and tons of things going on there. But what happens is you jump I remember my grandmother used to say, and she had a little thing of a frog, and it said, "Look before you leap," right? So before you jump into something, make sure you understand really what you're looking at and what this is for. And so that does have a huge impact on technology evaluations and research, in fact. So let's look at those shiny objects of the past 30 years. Many of you may be familiar, depending on your age. You may have heard about it. Just those things over those years that I've seen have made an impact on business and are kind of those major areas that have driven with business with technology. The first is, some of you may see this, the internet and e-commerce came out. Mosaic was a technology that took web stuff about 1993. It's actually the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web. Of course, when I graduated from college. So I started that this time, and it was really the dot-com boom. Right? Oh my gosh, what is this thing called a website? We gotta get on there quickly. And what's interesting, well, I have a sock puppet pets.com. You've never heard about it before. That was like the poster child of just a website and not much else. And it was great, but what's really left of that website and that company is the sock puppet. So it became a dot-com boom. So there's more to the internet and e-commerce. As now today it's ubiquitous, right? Everybody has it. Of course, you have a website and mobile, everything now, it's all other things as well. But back in the initial part of when this was coming, this was something brand new, and people were jumping to the latest and greatest things. What happened after that? You had the actual ERP, it was called. So Enterprise Resource Planning. What is that? You may have heard of SAP, Oracle. PeopleSoft used to exist, now it's part of Oracle and JD Edwards. They were kind of big things. And what did that do from a data perspective? It's like, okay, well, it's all the different functions of doing all my financials are all in different separate systems. How can I bring that together, right? So technology was like, what's it? SAP? They had my SAP and all these things. It was like, oh my gosh, it's very involved. Many years, very disruptive, but they said, I've got to go down this path in order to survive, right? And if I didn't, I wasn't seen well from public on Wall Street, or maybe I couldn't be able to pull all this, different business functions together under a suite of products, whether it's financials or HR or manufacturing. Really started it, ERPs really broke their teeth, so to speak, on manufacturing side, and then it bled into the rest of business. Then you got in and said, okay, I have all this data. Now what do I do with it? Well, this idea of business intelligence, data analytics, more effective reporting. Now I have all this data. Now I'm getting the onlines going on, right, with the web and all that. Now I have this ERP with internal information. How do I report on it? How do I know what I'm doing? So the analytics of data was a big thing that it continues to this day, but this was when this started happening. Business intelligence. And then you got into mobile devices, and the evolution I call portable information and communication. So some of you may not know what the first thing up here is, but that's actually a Palm Pilot. So Palm Pilot was, initially that I took my calendar, and it was on my palm of my hand, and have the whole book. So those who remember that, I had my contacts in this, and you could actually let a little stylus that could write stuff on. You could actually understand your handwriting. Bled into the BlackBerry was a big part of really moving into that okay, that's the emailing. I can actually communicate. It's all, you could hear it, and that was like a thing, very secure. And now you see the iPhone there and droids, and expand beyond that, right? Tablets and all that thing. But the idea of that is that there are a lot of players in this space, as you guys even know, today's world, that were the shiny, oh my gosh, I got to get it that bends, the screen that flips that you see now, and oh, I need that. Do you really need that? And is that the shiny object? Maybe we do. And so there should be protocols and things, the ways to mitigate that influence of the shiny object as you go through technology, whether in the palm of your hand or on a desktop. Then came social media, right? This was coming in. Probably you see these on here, right? MySpace isn't on here, right? That was the initial one that came out. Before that, even when the internet was coming out, there was things, AOL was big, and CompuServe and those type of things as well. They had Messenger. Now there's Yahoo Messenger, and Yahoo's not really a thing anymore. And Google Plus, right? Not many people are using that. And now you have Twitter or X, and Snapchat's come and gone, is there. You got all these different applications. So this immediate interconnection in communities with technology. I need it now in my hand. And what this does, though, this is kind of a game on technology that companies actually use, because now my buyers or my consumers, whoever they are, my employees have it all here. And there's more technology now. My mobile app with all my interconnections, I have them all in zone in there. And that has ramifications for what really you have to do and think about from a research perspective and so forth, and the influences that can have on that research. Then the thing of Internet of Things. And many of you seen, oh my God, my refrigerator, and now I can tie in through the web. It knows when the weight of my milk is low enough, it's going to automatically order that, and it's going to come to my house, already charged, no problems, right? That was all everything was, the George Jetsons, and aging us a little bit, but the Jetson thing of everything's internet, right? And then flying cars, and I know that's actually starting to happen, right? But the idea of, you see now more of those things like Ring, where now I can check when someone comes and drops off a package. I can protect my house. I can look and have it as a security thing, but I also can do a Nest. I can, change my temperature in my home from wherever I am, and the combination of those things. So those are another thing that a lot of different technology get out there. And these are, as you go through technology, some people say, oh, I need to have these things. Well, normally when you drill down to it, why do you have to have those? Well, because the vendor came. Yeah, well, the vendor's here to sell you those things. Of course, they're going to say it's the best thing, and you need it today. Of course, you may or may not. And if you go by only the cool things, that's great. Those are the early adopters. I've got to have it now. I'm ahead of the game. May or may not be. You may be, or you may be. Now you went ahead and you picked the wrong thing to choose, right? And now you're on. Now something else is now driving into Cayman. I mean, even technology, back when there was the video recorder, right? You had VHS versus Betamax. Betamax was Sony. A lot of people want Betamax. Well, VHS actually won that game. So, but this is more of that interconnectedness of everything, and really from the palm of your hand, as you can see, these kind of build up to each other. Now you have all this information. So when I talked about business intelligence, that was initially, right? Ps, websites. Now you have a lot of data, and it's overwhelming. And that's why the great thing of many folks on this call who are researchers, truly, are actually using real data, actually authenticated data, to help direct it. Because as you all know, two people could take the same piece of data and come up with actually totally divergent opinions and direction where you want to go. And that impacts technology in many ways, because also if you don't have the right data and you're actually doing results of the technology and the data is off, you're going to think, well, that technology didn't work. Well, maybe it did. You just didn't have the right information that came out of that. And so those are things that become very, very important. Then we get into the blending of the physical and virtual world. And I've done actually some of the stuff. Actually, I've done a lot of visualization without having to have the goggles and without having to have an app, and make the physical match the reality. So they somehow you see the down the right hand side of the goggles now. With even Apple came out with one that looks pretty cool, right? It's great, really higher. I mean, took it up a notch, no question. And then you have, augmented reality, so virtual augmented reality, and you just have, what they say, plain old visualization, which is, as I said, don't need goggles, don't need an app. It's on the screen, looks so real. They feel like you go into it, but now somebody else can use it, and it's all that. So there's always a balance with that. And so with this technology, it gets really cool, right? And that's how I need to have it. I've seen many cases of pilots go through in visualization, especially these days, and they go down a path, pick everything done, spend a lot of money, and it really doesn't go anywhere, because it becomes an impediment to actually doing whatever you're trying to do for the end consumer or the business itself, the internal folks, etc. Now we go into AI and machine learning. Well, AI and machine learning has actually been around for some while. It's just the chat GTP, came more out there in palm of people's hands, so to speak. But it's a rapidly evolving complexity. And it was brought up on the earlier call today with Midjourney and things like that, and ChatGPT. But there's so many things. I mean, about right now, the latest research is now about 125 to 150 AI-related applications are being deployed a week. And I say AI in quotes because AI is the next bandwagon, right? Oh, it does AI. I got you. And that's the hard part because it's very complex. There's a lot of things that I've seen. Actually, I've been in a lot of discussions actually with interesting AI technology with drones, AI technology with on top of a customer service side, actually with healthcare, and actually doing analytics on information. Where does it drive you? And there's a whole new thing I just saw recently that there's going to be in November a global thing about actually trying to come with did some controls here and some governance and some things on AI itself. What's really behind that, what the biases and stuff are all behind that. But those are also things to take a step back and breathe for a minute. I think it's in the first presentation about breathing when you're doing a presentation or a performance is like breathe on technology. You gotta take a step back. Not gonna happen tomorrow. Nothing's gonna happen. But you have to make sure it's correct and appropriate. So what does the shiny object really do? What is the shiny object can greatly influence organizations' research on technology, software, hardware, even services such as managed IT, cloud computing, all those things that are out there. There's other technology. And where I see it actually, and I've seen it many a time and helped get through it, is sometimes it sets the direction of the research. So the problem is when you want to research, you all on this call, many of you want to be independent, right, and objective. Now I'm being set in the direction because of the shiny object that maybe whoever's paying for the research or whoever's influencing the research is directing it in that way. And that's hard. And that can definitely put you in a different spot and kind of mitigate the actual effectiveness of that research. It also, the shiny object can manipulate the support. And what I mean by that is that others have in mind, well, I was told I have a vendor that came by and I've seen this in my personal life. That's great. But we're in a different industry than your quote unquote personal life. Those are biases that everyone has. And that can manipulate the support you get from leadership or whoever's buying the research, whether it's your own company, whether you're doing it for other companies, et cetera. It can definitely do that. It can also shade the interpretation of the results. So I had the shiny object is what I really thought we were supposed to go. The newest technology with this great thing. And you're telling me it's this? Wait a minute. That must not be right. Because you're being shaded by that cool thing, whatever that may be. So how do you get around that? How do you mitigate that? Right? It's challenging, and especially the high pace. Everyone talks about high pace. Well, back when I showed you the pets.com, that was huge craziness coming out of. When I was in banking at the time and the leader of the CIO even said to me, because I was younger at the time, is what do we do about this thing called the internet, like this web? Like, do we put stuff out there? I'm like, well, let's calm down for a second. Let's look what this is. What do we need to put? So how do you mitigate that, especially on the business technology research and influence? Focus. The first thing is to focus on the strategic objectives. If you maintain clear, consistent strategic objectives of what you're doing, not what the shiny object telling me to go, because the shiny object will tell you where it goes and it may not where you want to go. If you have that, you ensure your constant communication of common goals, that everyone in the organization is aware of it. And I'll talk about a little bit later about influences that can happen invisible that maybe say, oh, well, the leaders are all on board, but those they actually listen to may not be. And you have to align the technology to support the ultimate vision. The technology should support your vision, your mission and your vision. Your vision statement, mission statement. Sometimes they get overblown. Sometimes people bring in a huge consulting firm, do it for 10,000, a lot of money, and you come up with something. You're like, that's it. But that really drives your company. Your mission and vision must, and your objectives. So you must align to that. The next is data, clean and clarified data. I have a 4.5-year-old, so I like getting the Legos. But so Legos, this mess of data. But I've actually used this previously before I even had my son join our family. So, but this chaos of mangled of data everywhere. Just think of those pieces of Legos, and you see it, and then over the right is like this orchestration. So with data is rated data orchestration. Why is that important? The data you're using and the data you have, it's very hard to evaluate if the data is not right, if the data is a mess, because now it's not the technology, it's the data. And I've seen that time and time again. I was like, oh, Why is it taking so long to even put this in? Must be something wrong with what we selected. No, we didn't really understand the data that we were going through. We didn't understand what's behind it, all the different spreadsheets, the back of a napkin, literally, all these different things all over the place. If you really don't understand that or don't have a clear understanding of that, it definitely will impact your research and impact what the results are. You also have to have standard terms and attributes. Worked at companies and been consultant at companies where there was multiple definitions for even the term customer, for even employee. You think, oh no, that's standard. Of course, that's what it is. Well, you'd be surprised, and the attributes associated with this. Right? You also have to consistently apply measures and metrics. The measures you measure on one thing better be the same as the other, because if you don't, it's apples and oranges. It's not the same. So it's that to me, data is so important, and to have that clarity before you even step into this. Because if you don't, you're going to be back in that first part of this picture here with the chaos and everything like that. This was mentioned a little bit before, I think, in the first presentation today about that. Yeah, I think, and I wrote my notes on everybody's stuff. The internal, I think the internal group, right? And I say, don't forget your employees. I think you need to leverage your most important asset, your internal employees. And I think with the Smucker combination, obviously people were supportive of the products. So it was products, research. With technology, though, there is the EX, the employee experience, really impacts and alignment. You need to understand that with the customer, the CX. There's a lot of research, a lot of focus on CX, DCX, and DV, but your employees, many of them who are the front line, whether that's front line in customer service, on the phone, actually at a physical spot, a place, whether it's someone actually coming to their home and they have technology in their hand, whether they're actually in the field, all those technologies are everywhere. Your employees know really how it's really working, how it impacts the customer experience, how it impacts the overall experience. And some of them may be employee tools that you're putting in. You make sure they're but these are with what I have found in doing, research with that, is actually bring them into the bear. Bring them and talk. Are they going to influence it? They come with their own biases of what they like or don't, and also make sure it's across the organization, across the country, across different areas. So it's finance, it's whatever areas you're talking about. Finance could be finance. I mean, I've dealt with purchasing and marketing and sales and finance and operations and IT and blah, blah. And everyone comes from a different perspective and different parts of the organization. Not everybody at the top, but a lot of your frontline people, and some of the people at the top actually are the frontline people, because they could be your salesperson. They're the ones selling the company, depending on the size of the company. So you need to make sure you include them in that. Bias. As we talk about all different, as we know, there's bias about everything. Everyone has a bias. No matter who you are, you have a bias. It's true. And there's different types. There's what I call them invisible influencers. So you have to be aware of those and surface those up. And there's common ones that I've seen in the impact and the view of technology. Confirmation bias. So focus on what I pre-existed believe. Well, I believe that already. Therefore, that must be it. And we should go with that technology because I said, I've used them before in my past life and they were great, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. It's good information, but this shouldn't be the only decision maker here for doing any type of research, anything on selecting or evaluating technology. Availability. Well, it's easy to recall the information. Why? The vendor was here last week. And it was really cool, snazzy presentation, as they talked about on the first call, performance, etc. There's status quo bias, that I preferred it. Well, we just like things the way they are, and the tool's working fine. Why do we have to do that? Nothing against that. It may be true, but you have to make sure that's how it is. It's also when people also status quo, and this ties into the last presentation. Who do I have on my team? My bias because they want to look like me, be like me, those type of things. Status quo, maintain who I have. That doesn't, the different perspectives and the different backgrounds and all that is essential to technology evaluations. It just is. Sunk cost. A lot of times biases, well, we've committed all that, we're already this far away. We've already put $1 million. We're just going forward for it. That's what the term chaos, like you're just going to keep doing something that doesn't work just because just call it loss, but it doesn't mean you can't use that technology, but doesn't mean just because you spent a lot of money on it, you're repeating maybe sins of the past, so to speak, and say, well, because we spent all this money, it must be good. That is so far from the truth. It's not. I myself have put in technology for a lot less, a lot better technology. Why? I worked with the vendors to actually get where they needed to go align where we are, work on the contract and all those things. Those are important because you're building a partnership, not a one and done, hopefully. And then selection bias. So drawing conclusions from a few data points. Oh, if you see things, done. And that's why when I do any type of evaluation, objective is very good, right? Where you have a scale of things, where you use objective information actually that fits into things. And you have a whole ramen of criteria, and depending on what it is certain criteria. And then you weight that criteria independent of things. And then you actually have the weight of the criteria and the weightings of folks to do that. And then you have other things related to that. So you have objective criteria, maybe very subjective things. So you try to not have multiple data points, because if you just have a few, what happens is that you get sown, and that becomes a stake in the ground. And now everything is focused just on that. And now you're drawing conclusions with all the facts. Test, learn, repeat. What was it within on your shampoo? Rinse, wash, rinse, repeat, so to speak. But relative to test, learn, repeat, you need, anytime you have technology, you have to plan purposely to include adequate end user testing. End user meaning from the user, right? Whether it's employee, maybe you actually do some testing with and you part of this research, part of that with actual people who are using it on the front end. How do people interact with your website? Well, let's figure that out. Let's figure we're testing it as we're doing it. We'll put it live, because you can test that, and you all know this. You can do testing without it being quote unquote live with real people, and so forth. And you always strive for continuous learning. This whole cycle here, it's like validate, you learn, you improve. You have to constantly do that, because even if there are things that you may have heard from implementations. There used to be a waterfall implementation was big. What is that? Waterfall implementation was like, all right, I design, I build, test, put in, that's the sequence. Boom, 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 boom. And then there's been a new, relatively new, it's been around for a while actually, is agile, which is I do things, learn quickly, learn and fail quickly, right? They're good and bad about both of them. I don't think, it depends on what you're putting in. It depends on the organization, it depends on a lot of things. Regardless of those methodologies, and there's a thing called SDLC, which is software development lifecycle. There's a lot of complexity. It can get overly complex in my view, especially in technology. You just got to continue to think about improving it over and over. It always can be better. Things can always be different and better. And I think the key of that is that continuous research. Sometimes you would probably have found you do the research and it's like, oh, okay, we got the system in, we're good. You are. How's it working? Are you testing it? Are you seeing are you checking in with the consumer? Are you checking in with the employee? Are you checking with whoever's using it in the field? Is it working? And the more you do that, the better that the shiny object doesn't come and replace it. I've been on a number of clients where they wanted the shiny object, and I saved them a lot of money because I said, you have internally, you have something that's going to really use. You've already built it and you have the team for it and you have the support for it. So why are we going down this path? Because you want that? Like, we're good right now. So those are things. The other thing is avoid the echo chamber research. What I mean by that is don't research within the same people in the same group that have always done blah, 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 blah. Bring in outsiders. And I know outside research, not to say outside researchers, maybe, but it could be your internal teams that are researching. But think of other things that bring you a different perspective on technology. Because the more you do just research in that, it becomes basic confirmation bias is another bias, right? You're just confirming what you thought already, and that may or may not be the right thing. This is I don't know if you're familiar with HBDI. It's from Herman Global LLC. I have the website down there. I've used it as a consultant. A couple, one of the firms I was at, people were certified in this, and you don't necessarily have to be. The concept is what I'm using, and that's why I highlight, if you want to do more of the whole brain. It was a concept about how people think. So it gets rid of the biases of who they are, because demographics is one thing, obviously, and that potentially has an influence of how they think and how they feel and all that. Obviously it does. but you get away from, you focus on those, and it focuses on, they use colors. So they have blue, yellow, red, green. And to think about this, like if you think about the stereotypical C-suite of organizations, right? Your typically your analytics side, your blue side is your CFO side. And where it means that they're coming, that is the lens they are really strong that they think about. So when you're talking to them and you don't have numbers and you're not talking to them, they're not really listening. I mean, they are, but they're not necessarily. They're looking at them and they may focus too much on the numbers. They'll go to that shiny object called numbers. And it's very rational, very cut to the chase is what we do. And then on the opposite side, you have the other side of that. You have the more of the experimental, the strategy, the yellow. Well, let's think about this. Let's take a step back. And sometimes we're in conflict with the person that's like, let's just keep going, right? And that is, sometimes you'll find CFO that are good. They're thinking strategic. Your CEOs, those type of leaderships or leaders of your organizations, at that type of level thought process and uniqueness. And then you get down, and the CEO actually, a true CEO actually has all of these in one. The good ones that are doing, because they see it from all perspectives, and it's very hard. It's not easy to have that. The rational side, the blue, the red, is very much focused on the people, the relationships, individuals, and about that side is important. And then you'll find them more in a CRO, CHRO on the HR side, because obviously they do a lot of numbers too, but they come in with that lens of thinking of that way. It's an important lens. Like all of these, none of these are not important. They're all important, right? That's why you have to think about it. And then the green side is the practical side, which is really process. People like a COO operations. You go this, you go this, you go this, you go this. Like that's what we do. But it's where the lens they're really thinking about. And so there is actually, you can actually take this that's not a test, but this tool, and understand. Actually, we've done that myself with people in groups, and to really, sometimes it is helpful to have someone take it, so then you understand when you're presenting to them. It helps to understand the leadership's decision making style. Where do they really default to? The other thing that's interesting about HBDI is when people get stressed, and I know this presenter talked about stressful stuff. Where do they go to? What squeezes it? So just think about this. I know I'm drawing in the air, and you can't see what I'm drawing, but you have a circle here, and there's a square of where there's some data points you would be, because everyone has blue in them, they have yellow in them, they have red in them, they have green in them. It's just how much from a style perspective. When you get stressed, sometimes some things get squeezed down and you go to your corners. For me personally, what's interesting, when they did it, I was pretty good square, which was kind of cool to see, meaning that I had a good thread of the blue, the yellow, and the red and the green. When I did stress, though, I went to my opposite corners, which was interesting. I got very blue, which very analytical, got to do, and very red, which usually are actually diametrically opposed to each other. But I get very like, got to drive this thing, and then how's everyone doing, right? And making sure everyone's okay. And these are just concepts in a sense of how I'm thinking about it. But it really helps to evaluate, align your research to how your audience thinks, because you improve your communication so you can be truly heard. So if you have a bunch of people, like I've been in a number of meetings where I have all these, and I know they're very strong. They never went through this HBDI, but I just know them very well. I'm in with things, and they're very strong in their corners, and that's hard, right? And you're like, God, how do I do a presentation that hits everything? Like even my presentation today, like some people are like, oh my God, turn those off, snooze fest, they got to go away, but others may like it. So it's hard, and to understand that though, your audience is. And to understand that, and it's hard to do that when you're doing research on consumers and where they're coming from, because you may not have this, but you can kind of tell sometimes when you're having multiple conversations with people really where they're focused on, because people come out and have the way they think as they talk and as they focus on things. So it's definitely another area where you can get away from the shiny object, because what happens is, if I am someone who's very blue, I want someone that's going to knock this out and it's going to be a low cost. Okay, that's where that's where they're going from. So you can adapt it to, well, yes, I understand that this one's a little bit higher cost, but this is what it brings us, blah, 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 right? that changes the mindset because they're coming from one way only. How much is this thing going to cost me? Or someone from the blue side, how are my people going to feel about this? Like, what's the disruption going to be of my organization? Very important point. But sometimes you have to disrupt just a little, you have to disrupt a little bit sometimes in order to move things forward. So just bear that in mind. Again, more information on that website. If you want to talk to me about this offline, happy to go through all of this. Did it had clients take it. It's a very interesting way to think about things. And lastly, and this is my last point here, is look beyond today. And what I mean by that, especially when I talk about a lot of that I'm doing now, is creating a sustainable transformation. And sustainable is important. A lot of times there's digital transformation. It's a big buzzword. It's been out there for a long time, but people are now focused on it. You have to evaluate things on future sustainability. The problem sometimes is you may not even know what your future is, but you have to think about that. And you can't get tied into things. Oh, we're going to be locked down this software for the next 10 years. And we know very well today it's rapid pace. It doesn't mean you have to get on that train, but you have to be aware of, can it keep us for future sustainability? The other big thing that you have to be aware of and make sure is there, and this thing many times gets lost. As I talked about when I kicked off my day 31, you need to define post-go live support and resource model. Like, when you evaluate a technology, do they have a support model? Do I have the people to do a support model? Oh, a company of 3 people. I don't think so. Or I'm a company of 100 people. I'm 10,000 people. I still don't have the right people. And is it going to be IT? Is it going to be the business owning it? Who's making a phone call? Is this if this is the customer facing? Well, who's that first line of defense? And are they going to be able to handle it? Oh, yeah. They're going to do it. Well, yeah, with their day job. But we all know that, right? You always have multiple hats. Everybody these days is doing 10,000 things. What I found though, that model doesn't work. It doesn't. And you have to make sure that you have that in mind. And if you're not going to be able to do that because of money, and we all know all those things, then have awareness of it. Make sure you define, everyone's aware that this could happen, and reminding that that's what's going to happen, right? The other thing is expand your potential use cases and evaluation, meaning look outside of the one you're just looking at today. This is how we do it, blah, 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 blah. This is today. Well, literally in the next second is tomorrow, is the next day, right? I mean, literally, like as I am talking, the future is happening. It's a weird concept, right? Because literally I started this call, 40 minutes ago. Now it's 40 minutes from the future of 40 minutes ago. So it's a weird concept, but but you have to think about that from a use case perspective. Make sure too, you bring in those other perspectives. It's so important to do that of other people. You say, oh, well, this is just for HR. Well, okay, but HR impacts everybody, right? So shouldn't we bring in other people? And you always think about the others. It doesn't mean they have a quote unquote say, but you have to have the use cases to evaluate it. That also they're going to give you a different view that you may not have even thought about. And so I think those are just very, very important to think about, and something I always, have stressed on any type of technology. Technology can create stress, it can create anxiety, it can create a lot of things. And there's a lot of unknowns with that. And even people, quote unquote, the experts don't know. I mean, look at AI, there's a lot of experts out there. They may or may not actually know what to come, because we all may not know what's going to happen. But if you have all these in place, you have these mitigation strategies, you're going to be able to actually calm everyone, not jump, look before you leap, so to speak, and be able to not have the shiny object be everything and not have it influence. And then what that allows is that your valuations are objective, they're clean, they're associated with your organization, your company, your department, and not everybody else's. And it allows you then to make this sustainable going forward. So with that, I am done my spiel. I know it's I think 1:42, I think. So I know, Courtney, if you want to Q&A, I don't know how to do this, but that's my presentation.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A. I wanted to ask one question.
Sure.
Especially as we see AI coming in and possible dangers and all the rhetoric around it.
Yes.
Do you see organizations wanting to adopt it more or being hesitant about it? Are they looking at it as a new shiny object?
They are. A lot of them are. Why? Because I have ChatGPT on my phone. I have the app. Because I
Mhm.
tried to sign up online. They're like, oh, you can't sign. I'm like, oh, what? And I got it on my phone. I also was one of the first early people. I guess I gave feedback for Bard, Google's version of Chat. So I gave feedback on stuff like that. And I was asked to do stuff like that. But
You're helping
yes,
them out.
I'm helping them out. Well, because there's multiple things out there. It's law. It's language modeling, right? Is what it is, and it's very unique. But it's been out there for a while, actually. Just there's now more money and more focus to it. But hi, Kitty. Um,
He's been helping me.
nice. I love it. Animals always help. I should have had that. They're another mitigating. Bring in
There you
animals. It
go.
makes everybody fine, no matter what type of animal. Make sure it's the right animal they like. They're not allergic to it. But yeah, AI, what I have seen is that there are a lot of tools out there that say they have AI and they're getting in there and like putting it in there. But I was literally on a call, last week, was it last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, about like Salesforce is actually trying to put AI in it. So Salesforce has been out there, ubiquitous, huge, huge. And then now they're layering it in and figuring out how do you do that. The key with AI is that don't put anything on in ChatGPT you don't want the world to know. Just don't do it because the world will know it and actually they will replicate it and it will be quicker than a social media post.
I was gonna
Well
say just
quicker.
like social
And
media.
yeah, it's social media but on steroids, right? The one thing that they're finding is they're taking that technology, large language models, and putting it into your own ecosystem. So you have it all controlled and it's not being shared, but sharing with your own ecosystem. And so those are where I see it going, is that you're going to use it to enhance your better customer experience. There was an organization, and it made the news about this with AI. They put in an app, and they're for eating disorders. They
I
put an
saw
app
that
on.
as
Do you
well.
see that? And they turn on the AI, and now the AI is telling people who are anorexic not to eat. Like,
Giving them
what?
dieting tips.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they should be dieting, right? I mean, essentially not eating. Like that's the exact opposite of people who are vulnerable and are looking for it. And they were like, oh, we get better, we get more consistent because we have volunteers. And I get it, but don't just turn on things like especially that was so core to who they are. It's so I am seeing a lot of it. There is some hesitancy. I mean, organizations are recognizing there is the little scary thing of PII, privacy information, right? And information about me. It's already out there already, right? Enough out there with everything like that. But now it can quickly gather all things together, right? And so what AI can do, even with customer experience, right, is I call in and it's running something right now on me. It knows all my history from what I used before. It knows me, knows my demographics, and now it's putting a question to either directly via a chatbot, or to a human being saying to you, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I've seen you do, and now I'm selling you something. And I'm saying it in a way that you don't even need to get sold to, and it's kind of scary. What I've seen though in AI, unfortunately, out there, even on LinkedIn, I've seen fake LinkedIn profiles, completely, utterly fake. I just knew they were fake. I had a sense, but they look real, and they're trying to get into me. I've had recently that someone took over their LinkedIn and actually then pinged me through that and then wanted me to chat with them on the WhatsApp because it was like secure for them and I knew something was up, right? So there's a lot of that, unfortunately. But I think companies want to use AI to benefit, to move things forward. I think to your point, is Courtney, is that the shiny object of don't move too fast. Like the research is still out there. And if you go on those mitigation about your objectives, about the data, about all those things, it doesn't really matter what technology is being used. Is this going to help you? They're like, if we don't use AI, you hear those things. You're not an AI, you're going to die tomorrow. Well, you're not going to. It's trying to understand and harness it. And to me, you need to have, as I said, that test, learn, and repeat becomes even more important.
Absolutely.
You need to test, learn, and you need to control that because it can get out of hand quickly. And then someone's going down a path, just like I said about the eating disorder, that is completely opposite of where you want to go and destructive in many ways. So
yeah, I think about just in my career life, looking back at like big data and things like that, how everyone was like, oh, if you don't use big data, you'll never make it. And it's like, that's not the case. It's applicable in some situations, but it's not the be all, have all, do all.
right. Well, and also the folks on this call of researchers, what you bring is you bring the data. You bring the objective why I am doing things instead of leaping before I look, and jumping to those things. And that's where I think research becomes paramount now. The group on this, I mean, I've worked with a lot of researchers. I actually helped a client of mine, a big client, a big client with their research process. And how do I evaluate vendors and put into a tool, actually a technology, to help them track it and go through the details, and I help them with making sure contractual and negotiation, because that's my strength. And they were bringing the research, right, of how to do it. So, but it becomes so more empowerment to me, is that focus.
And then looks like we have a question in the Zoom chat.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Katia was curious to understand how many organizations actually actually consider the frontline team members' feedback prior to making these decisions. I really like that you included employee experience, but I had that same thought, like, do companies really actually do it?
They do, the problem is they don't all the time. And the problem about it is there is, as I said, all those biases. There's also bias. There's some of those biases. There's also biases of who I have in the selection committee, right? Who I have there. And when I've done it, you be selective. You bring it. What I also like to do is also what happens in companies is they pick the same people. Oh, I want Sally and Cassandra and blah, 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 because they're really good at this stuff, and I'm going to have them as be my feedback. Really? That's the echo chamber again. Now I'm echo chambering again. And yes, they mean that they're good people. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying you might want to bring a different perspective, and you might want to understand that they may be frontline, but they're in a great location, or they're in two locations that are doing fantastic. Down in Florida and one's in Maine. They're doing fantastic. What about the one in DC? What about the one in Texas? What about the one in Singapore and down in Australia? What about those perspectives? And so, yeah, they don't necessarily, because sometimes they're like, oh, it gets too big. And I'm not saying they're all going to have quote unquote the say. I'm going to get information from them. And maybe some of them will be in there to give me their final stuff, because I do want to hear that. But yes, it is challenging. And I think when you think about the technology, it's to take a step back and saying, who are those frontline? Where does this impact? And take really that step back, because technology has as well the weaves in and out of stuff, right? For instance, you'll have HR related stuff. Well, it's tied to, that's all internal stuff, is it? What about recruiting? And now it's all online. And is it really good? I mean, Workday is a big thing, and I see it all the time. Like Workday, you're like, oh, that's a Workday system, and they really didn't make many changes to it, and it's not that great. And did someone really take a step back who's not in that? And the problem also you have to get away from is if it's my technology, meaning I'm in recruiting, and I put a lot of effort to create this tool, and I may not have done all that I should have, but now I'm realizing that maybe it's not the best for what we need. You want to bring another, and you're not saying you're wrong. You're awful. Oh, that's terrible. You got to make people listen. We love what you're doing. We want to get other perspective of it, because that echo chamber again. And yes, and how you do that is ensure you really think about that and get out ahead of time. When you're thinking about the technology, whatever that is, I always think when you're planning, a lot of times people plan after they have the software. You should be planning and think about, how would I implement this? And what are the processes I'm going to go down? So will this technology, it's great, but it's going to be really hard to put in. And it's going to be really hard for my people to understand. And it's nothing against those people. It's just really hard to understand. It wasn't designed well. That doesn't mean the user, you guys, UX, the experience is going to be horrible. So why are we going down that path? And so it really does, I really stress that enough, that going through the employee, and also sometimes you might have contractors that work for you. Well, is the tool related to contractors? Is it someone in the field that, because I was at many companies, and especially home building, they have subcontractors and subcontractors, right? So how is that integrated with this, right? And then you have the back end. IT always wants, like, well, how am I going to integrate with those things? Like, okay, there's tools to do that. Everyone calm down. Like, we can do that. We can make that work. But you have to think of that before you go down the path, because that will get cut out. Like, well, no, that's not going to integrate. Well, it will. And we've shown that that's important. Most times it is a factor. I think if you go through that whole criteria, and I always find too that research is very helpful in even seeing about, to your point, Courtney, about AI. Well, what kind of AI should we be thinking about? Like, where should we layer in AI here? Should it be in customer care? Should it be in human? And there's other things out there. Where should it be? And how can I use the research team to help us think through that effectively, even conceptually? And I think that's important to think about.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I found that very interesting. I hope everyone else did as well.
I hope so too.
Yeah. We're gonna take a break and we'll be back in 7 minutes at 2 o'clock with our next presentation. Again, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate
Sure,
that.
no problem. And again, I just leave it. If anyone wants to reach out to me, there's my LinkedIn. Always open to have these discussions and, have further conversations, help out wherever I can too. And my firm, I can help in all types of organizations, as I said, both public, private, nonprofit, all the same. So in all types. So happy to help out with questions or things like that as well.
Excellent.
Awesome.
We'll take a
Thank
break
you so
and
much,
thank
Bill
you.
and Courtney, and thank you for this. So we're taking a break and then coming back on.
Yep.